If you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you would say to this mulberry tree, "Be uprooted and planted in the sea," and it would obey you. When I was a child, there was a mulberry tree that grew wild in our backyard. It was considered a weed tree. We would pick the berries and throw them at each other, getting stains on our fingers and clothes that just wouldn't wash out. Sometimes we'd try to make jam. The birds would feast on the berries, which made them poop purple all over the place. I'm sure there were days my mother would have liked to say to it, "Be uprooted and planted in the sea." But no one ever cut it down. I guess because my mother, a nature lover, figured the birds had to eat too. She was willing to pay the cost to care for the bit of creation around her. When we look at the state of creation today and what we as a species have done to it, it can become terribly disheartening. Systemic evil, like the destruction of the earth, can make us feel so powerless that we turn away from the problem and hope someone else will solve it. Or we become hyper-focused on the little things we can do, like turning out lights or recycling, without addressing the greed of countries and companies and even ourselves. Doing the preparation for this reflection made me look again at myself. How much do I take from the earth compared to how much I give back? How much am I willing to give up to protect the earth? I don't know about you, but I would like a solution that doesn't cause me too much discomfort. I'm not proud of that. I've always admired the prophet Habakkuk, especially in the reading we have today. He encounters the problem of evil in his era. He notices the strong oppressing the weak and rages at God about it. "How long, O Lord, I cry for help, but you do not listen. I cry out to you, violence, but you do not intervene. Why do you let me see ruin? Why must I look at misery?" Haven't you sometimes wanted to rage at God about the state of things and wondered why God doesn't intervene? Storms like the recent hurricane that struck Florida, if we really paid attention to it, might be as scary for us as their government falling apart was for the Israelites during Habakkuk's time. After his rant, in the unabridged version, Habakkuk shows his faithfulness to the relationship with God. He says, "I will stand at my post and take up my position on the rampart and keep watch to see what God will say to me and what God will answer to my complaints." And God points Habakkuk to God's dream for the world. Write down the vision clearly upon the tablets so that one can read it readily. For the vision still has its time, presses on to fulfillment, and will not disappoint. If it delays, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not be late. To me, this is reminiscent of Jesus speaking about the reign of God. That vision of God's, which is not yet here, is on its way and is already among us. Jesus fleshes out the vision and tells us what it would look like. I'm pretty sure that what it doesn't look like is me having so much when so many of my brothers and sisters have so little. In his last book, Jesuit author William Barry looks at how God handles it when God's dream gets blocked. Barry says that if we look through salvation history, there are repeating cycles of goodness and decline. The cycles of decline happen when humans move away from what God intends for the world. Given the destruction of the environment, levels of poverty, and prevalence of hate speak, to name a few, one could say that we are in a cycle of decline. God always handles these cycles of decline by doing something new to nudge us toward a cycle of goodness. And we are, if we're up for it, the way God does something new. We are, as Teresa of Avila says, the hands, feet, and eyes of God on earth. A couple of weeks ago, I was having a Habakkuk moment, seriously whining about how things are with climate change. We're not where we need to be, and I can't see it coming. A high school friend pointed me to an article about the owner of Patagonia Clothing, who was turning his whole company irrevocably over to organizations fighting climate change. He didn't just make a donation, he turned over his whole means of making a profit. I doubt I would have his courage. This story, to me, has God's fingerprints all over it, nudging us toward a cycle of goodness. In his encyclical Laudato Si, Pope Francis points us to God's dream for Mother Earth as our common home. He asks us to commit to caring for it in a more radical way than we have. There is a cost to this, but it's not just cost. There is joy. A lovely part of the United Church of Christ's statement of faith speaks to me of this. God calls us into the church to accept the cost and the joy of discipleship, to be servants in the service of the whole human family. What do we do about all this? Perhaps we are in the same position Habakkuk was. All we can do is complain to God about the state of things, and then stand open, waiting for God to answer. If we listen carefully, we might get a sense of God's vision for the world. More importantly, we might each get a sense about our unique, specific role in helping to bring that about. How much am I willing to do to further God's vision? Jesus assures us that if we have the tiniest bit of faith, we can make a difference in a seemingly impossible situation. Like my mom with the mulberry tree, there is a cost. But she also had the joy of birds and happy children. Can we believe that right alongside the cost of discipleship is the joy of discipleship? Can that encourage us to shoulder our share of the burden?